Nothing. The red. Okay. So we're going to keep talking about supply and demand. And now, what have I promised you about supply and demand? Right? We talked about how these individual decisions are all going to lead up to understanding what's going on the demand side of the market, understanding what's going on the supply side of the market, and how things can shift around. So I've also talked about how this is a workforce model. Right? This is a simplification that's very easy to build upon. Right? So when we get to things like, yeah, suppliers are actually in charge of their own prices, we're going to be able to incorporate that into the model that we already have. But to do that, we actually need to back up a bit and think about what's going on with the individual choices that are really going into this model. Because we've done a little bit of that. We talked about, we got choice A, or we got choice B, we got benefits, we got costs, and we can take some numbers, we can calculate out the economic surplus of a given choice. But and we've also talked about how this is going to lead us towards that supply and demand curves, right? But we're going to want to get a little bit more detail in terms of how we're thinking about individual choices if we want to then be a bit more flexible, right? And start incorporating more parts of the real world into our model so we can understand things a little bit better. Right? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So we've covered all this stuff, and I'm going to focus on number 4 because we've talked about. So we've talked about supply and demand. We've talked about how models change as the supply and demand curves change and what makes those curves shift. We also talked about the concepts of marginal benefit and marginal cost. Remember, we've talked about those as being something that is sort of like baked into the supply and demand curves. The supply curve for a given quantity, let's say this is 12, right, and this is 30. That's telling you that the marginal cost of producing the 12th unit of the good is 30. It costs them, 30 to make that 1 unit. Their total costs are that much more than they were before, right? By making that one more. Same thing on the demand side. You can look on the demand curve to find how much additional benefit one additional unit is going to bring to somebody by just looking on the demand curve, right? So that's really what we're going to be going into, right? We're going to be breaking down component pieces of supply and demand and get the sort of behavioral activity that's underlying this whole idea, right? We really want to think about incentives in a more detailed way, more flexible way that's going to let us explain a lot more kinds of behavior than just the basic supply and demand model, and even just market behavior, right? We're going to be able to get beyond that sort of stuff. So we're going to get a model of behavior we can use to understand activity in a lot of different scenarios, not just competitive markets. It's also going to help us understand exactly how changes get in the market and how they relate to individual behavior and also economic surplus. Right? We're going to keep talking about economic surplus. Because once we figure out all this sort of stuff, we're going to be able to not just think about how choices are made, but also when we do have a market, we can ask ourselves the question, well, who's benefiting from this market? How much? How do changes in this market benefit different groups of people, right? So I mentioned this is all going to be about marginal benefit and marginal cost, which it is, right? What those things are is going to differ depending on what we're talking about the supply or demand side of the market. So just as a quick reminder, the marginal benefit is the additional benefit that you get from doing 1 more unit of the thing, whatever that thing is. Marginal is a word that's going to pop up a lot in this course. You're going to continue to see it if you take more economics courses. It is just the economics-y kind of word for 1 more. If you're a calculus person, technically we're talking about the derivative here, but for the purposes of this course, 1 more is a way that you can read the word marginal. Same thing for marginal cost is the additional cost that you incur by doing 1 more unit of the thing. So, conveniently, the underlying behavioral model that basically all of economics is built on can be summed up in 1 equation. And this is the golden rule of economics. It applies everywhere, from all the stuff that we're doing in this course, all the way up to economists publishing academic papers and the stuff that you would do as a PhD student and all that sort of stuff really comes down to this 1 rule. People want to make decisions such that their marginal benefit is equal to their marginal cost. We can abbreviate as MB equals MC. That's it. That's basically all of economics in 1 line. Everything is just stuff that, if you take this seriously, what follows on from that? That's it. Everything is just at this at the core. So let's talk about what this means. So remember, marginal costs and benefits are the additional costs and benefits that you get from one additional unit, right? Which is distinct from the total cost and benefits. So to make the distinction clear, imagine you have a lot of food at home. You have a well-stocked pantry, okay? So you might value the total amount of all the food that you have in your pantry at, let's say, $300, right? You went to Costco, you stocked up, you got a lot of stuff in there, you got $300 worth of food, or $300 of value from the food that you get. However, because you have such a well-stocked pantry, you don't really need any more food, right? You already have a really well-stocked pantry. Any additional food would not be that valuable to you. So even though the total benefit of food that you have in your pantry is very high, the marginal benefit that you would get from more food is very low, right? So adding an additional box of crackers when you already have 20 boxes of crackers in there doesn't really bring you much additional benefit. So that would be a low marginal benefit, even though the total benefit is quite high. So given these two ideas, total benefit and marginal benefit, we're really going to be focusing on the marginal benefit. You can imagine why that is, right? Because marginal benefit is all about, well, what happens if you do a little bit more, a little bit less? And so if we're making decisions about how much of something to do, the marginal benefit is going to be the one that really matters. Okay, so that's basically it. As we go through supply and demand, both supply and demand are going to come down to this exact same equation. Because like I said, basically all of economics comes down to this one equation, right? Suppliers are trying to set marginal benefit equal to marginal cost. That's what they're trying to do. Consumers are also trying to set marginal benefit equal to marginal cost. That's also what they're trying to do. So the only question that we really have to figure out is, for a given decision maker in a given context, what is their marginal benefit and what is their marginal cost? Because once we figure out those two things, we know that they're going to try to set them equal to each other. Okay. Once we figured out what marginal benefit is and what marginal cost is for a given decision maker, we know what they're going to try to do. We can predict their behavior. Their behavior is going to be that they're going to try to set these two things